Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. How to make work optional. Making work optional is something that a lot of people associate with the FIRE community. Financial independence, retire early. So in financial independence, retire early, a lot of people talk about retiring early, and that actually turns a lot of people off. Kind of like reaching financial freedom in the first place. Some people have the perception that money is evil. I grew up with a very racist, homophobic family that would say things like, the rich are just horrible people. I mean, how else could they get rich unless they were horrible people? They must be ripping somebody off somehow. One of the first things we need to do is overcome our fear of money. Most of us understand you need to pay bills, so we work to make enough money to cover the bills. But something in our mind says if we work for more than we need, we're joining the bad people. Kind of like some of us look at retiring early and we think of retiring as in your 60s or 70s when you're done working and you can now just enjoy life. A part of our brain resists enjoying life now, thinking that it has to be a part of a retirement. So for me, what really matters in the FIRE community, because most of the thoughts line up with the way I do things, is financial independence, to make work optional. There is a monumental amount of mental peace that comes when you work because you want to and not because you have to. In order to make work optional, there's really three main phases. The first phase is to understand what is work. Have you ever thought about why do we work? Most people think we work because we're going to pay the bills. Well, there's a lot of ways to make money, but work is consistent. We have kind of recurring bills that we know what to expect. So we find a job that lines up with what it costs us to live. Sometimes we develop a skill to make more money, but developing the skill can take just as much money as it's going to increase your income. We work because they pay us to be there. We work for cash flow. We're going to have money going out for living expenses. So we need money coming in for living expenses. We're going to have money going out for food. We're going to have money going out for transportation, entertainment, healthcare, the main things. And that didn't even come down to entertainment, travel, those kind of things. I mean, the needs, more important than the wants. We work for cash flow. And most people don't think of that. We think we work for a paycheck or we work to pay the bills. But when you go to work, what you're trying to do is get cash flow. When you spend time at work, you're actually putting your employer in your debt. Most jobs are designed to where you work for 1 or 2 weeks, putting the employer in your debt. And at the end of that time period, they pay you a paycheck. That paycheck wipes out the balance. So they're no longer in your debt. Ever wonder why the employer wants to be in your debt? Because they're going to make more money off of your money than it costs to pay you. You're going to produce value to the employer. It's why they pay you to be there. So we work for that money. So the first step when it comes to reaching financial independence, as much as most people don't like to hear it, is actually working. You're not financially independent until you find the money to put to work. Michael Zuber says this often, and I think he nails it really well. We don't get rich quick. We want to get wealthy for sure. Learning how to make money is step one. And there are several ways to do that. The goal should be to find a way to get paid based on your results instead of selling your life 1 hour at a time. That can be a sales position. That can be a marketing position. Most of the jobs I've ever had have been hourly. I was selling my life 1 hour at a time. My original plan was to do 20 years in the Marine Corps, 20 years in law enforcement, and then retire. 2 pensions, calling it good. So working, selling my life 1 hour at a time for up to 40 years to get those pensions to retire on. Here's the risk with that. After Desert Storm, the Marine Corps downsized. So that job went away. The idea of even getting to that pension went away. In 2008, when the recession hit, I got laid off from a police department. So that job and possible pension went away. So we work to develop cash flow coming in. Step 2 should be learning to save. Spend less than you're making. Not many people pull this one off. A lot of people are actually living on credit, so they're spending more than they make. And credit cards and loans, they make it really easy. Pay no interest for 12 months. Buy more than you can afford because you're not going to feel the pain now. You're going to feel the pain later. So a lot of people are racking up debt, or we get stuck with not only consumer debt, student loan debt. We're told at a young age, you're only successful if you go to college. We're told over and over and over that you're only successful if you go to college. 15% of high school graduates continue on to a 4-year degree, but most of us at least attend school and rack up student loan debt, which is the worst kind of debt. We have good debt and bad debt, but is bad subject to gradation. That would be not the baddest, the worst debt is student loan because it's unforgivable. You can't bankruptcy it. You can't, no matter what tragedy happens in your life, that debt is there. Learning to live on less than what you make. And part of that really stresses making money. You can only save 100% of what you make. It's limited. And that is if you don't have any housing cost, any food cost, any healthcare cost, any travel or entertainment. If you have no cost, you can save 100% of what you make, which sometimes is possible when you're like 10, 11, or 12 years old. But once you start to have expenses like a car or paying for your own food, saving 100% of what you make is difficult. It's the actual goal. I'll cover why, but it's hard to do that. So we need to find ways to increase your income because you can only save 100% of what you make. There's no limit to what you can make. Sometimes it's your job, increasing the amount of money you make at your job by becoming more important to the employer. And in the dinosaur days, you were rewarded for staying at a company for a long time, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. In the last 10 to 20 years, the best way to get a raise is to change companies. At your company, you're probably going to get a 3 to 7 COLA, cost of living raise. Maybe you might even not get one. Sometimes when you switch companies, you get a 20% increase in your pay because that's how they enticed you to go there. So that's different than it used to be. It's not as frowned on to change companies now as much as it was before. They even came out where they changed the law where non-competes can only cover you if you make up $100,000 or more. If you make less than that, I'm pretty sure it was a federal change and it was a Washington state change, but they can't hold you to a non-compete if you're making less than $100,000 because people know sometimes the best way to make more money was to switch jobs. There are also side hustles you can develop. You can learn to make money that doesn't require you working a full-time job, especially now in the last couple of years with how many remote or working at home jobs there are. I'm not saying to do this, but there are people who have more than one of those jobs that are considered full-time, but somehow they do them both while they're at home. I didn't say to do that. I said it's happening. So now you're working for cash flow. You're trying to limit your expenses. You're trying to spend less than you make. And sometimes this can be eliminating expenses. Cut the cable cord. And for a couple of years, that made sense. Get rid of cable because it saved you $100 to $200 a month. Well, now if you have enough streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, you're paying as much as when you had cable. But at least you don't have commercials. So to me, it's still an upgrade. What to me was more important than eliminating small expenses like your latte factor or cutting the cable was to eliminate housing expenses, which for most of us is the largest expense. We call this the cheat code to wealth, where you reduce or eliminate your housing costs by house hacking. That can be renting out rooms in your place or buying a place that is small multifamily where you live in one unit and rent out the others, or you use owner-occupied lending to buy a house, live there for a year, and in a year you do it again and rent out the house you just moved out of. So there's several versions of house hacking that lower our biggest expense. During this time when we're trying to earn as much as we can by increasing our income, we want to spend less than we make. It's important to avoid life creep. When you develop a side hustle that starts making $100 to $500 a month, you don't add $100 to $500 a month to how much you spend to live. That goes into your saving for investing. The third step, first is make money. Second is spend less than you make. The third step is to put that money to work, to buy assets that produce cash flow. We start out working for cash flow, but eventually we want to buy things that produce cash flow. This can be, to me, my least favorite option that's talked about a lot in the FIRE community. If you're in the Choose FI group or the Mr. Money Mustache groups, everybody talks about the 4% rule. Investing in stocks to the point where your portfolio grows enough to where with an average increase of 10% a year, you could take out 4% to live on, leaving enough percent left to pay the taxes for the money that you're taking out and enough to cover inflation in normal years. Over a long enough timeline, inflation is 2 to 3%. The last 2 years, it's been a black swan event where it's way more than we were planning for. So my problem with the 4% rule isn't that I don't like stocks. It's that this is the version of reaching financial freedom that takes the largest amount invested. If you need $40,000 a year, the way the 4% rule is you need to invest 25% of your annual expenses. So if it takes you $40,000 a year to live, you need to invest $1 million. But it's still a path a lot of people choose because ultimately when it comes to investing, you need to invest in a strategy that excites you. We are more likely to stick to a plan we're emotionally invested in. If real estate doesn't excite you, do something else. Stocks don't excite me. So that's the first one. When it comes to figuring out how to reach financial freedom, a lot of people think, I make this much money at work, so I need to make that much money from a source other than work, which is financial freedom, when money coming in is larger than your living expenses. But the way they're thinking about it is a little bit wrong. When we're working, we pay the highest level of taxes. That is earned income. It is taxed at the highest level. We're also saving for retirement. We're also saving to invest. We have the cost of commuting. It costs money to get to work, to have the clothes, to have the electronics it takes to do the job. When you stop working, those expenses go away. You're still possibly, depending on your investing strategy, going to pay taxes. You could have some expenses that go up, like currently you're probably paying $100 to $500 a month for healthcare, and your employer is paying the remainder. When you retire, you're going to pay for your healthcare. So you're going to also be paying the employer's portion. So there are some expenses that can go up, but it's not as much as saving for retirement, paying the highest in taxes, saving to invest. All of that adds up. So usually we don't need to have enough passive income to replace our whole income. We need to have enough passive income to replace our living expenses. And to find that freedom number, to figure out what financial independence is, the best way, instead of projecting forward what you think it's going to be, is look at the data you already have. Look at the last 6 months. Look at your bank statements, credit cards, cash transactions, Venmo, PayPal, anything that you're using for money transactions, and figure out what are you actually spending every month, and then pad that. For me, financial freedom, I think in my mind, financial independence happened when I pretty much reached what my wage was, because that's more than what my living expenses were. I'm at about almost 5 times my living expenses now. I've heard some people say, I love my job so much I would do it for free. Okay, here's my official technical opinion of that statement. That's stupid. I love my job so much. This is the only job I would do for money. Makes more sense to me. So we learn to make as much as we can. We develop side hustles so that we can make more, so that we can spend less than we make. Now we want to invest in cash flowing assets. I talked about the Trinity study of the 4% rule, how it works. And a lot of people in the FIRE community like it. I don't like it for a couple of reasons. One, stocks don't excite me. 2, you have to invest so much into stocks for it to have an impact that it's not my chosen path. The next path is to start and grow a business. You can start and grow a business, or you can buy a business. I actually invest in several that are businesses. I own part of a headphones company called Meters Music. So if you check out Ashdown, it's sold on Amazon China, Walmart Mexico. We're looking at sales in the United States. It's a UK company. So there are actually websites where businesses exist that are for sale. Flippa.com, EmpireFlippers.com, BusinessBuySell.com. Ways that you can look up what businesses are for sale. A lot of people, when we talk about real estate, which is what my content usually covers, in case you haven't figured it out already, there are businesses that are for sale. And one thing that I'll say is, I am not an entrepreneur. I'm an investor. And here's the difference. I said you can start and grow a business with the goal of having somebody else run it. Kind of like the trucking school that I work for. The owners that own 90% had the business, they grew it, I run it. They don't have to come in and run the day-to-day. So you could do a business like that. You can go to those business websites to buy a business that's for sale, that's already up and running. You do your research just like real estate, and you can buy an asset that you can grow and have other people run. The reason I'm not an entrepreneur is because a lot of people say, I want to be an entrepreneur because I don't want to have a boss. And my answer to that is, congratulations, every single customer with a Yelp account is now your boss. And other people will say, I don't want a job because I don't want to have to work 40 hours a week. Well, if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably going to work 80 hours a week. So the 2 main reasons why people want to be an entrepreneur are the reasons I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm super lazy. I don't want to work 80 hours a week. And I don't want a bunch of customers with Yelp accounts to be my boss. I'm an investor. I want to take money and put it to work into something that pays me without me having to sell my life 1 hour at a time. Stocks, growing a business. Then there's dividend stocks. You can actually buy stocks that pay you. So there are stocks like AT&T, or you can invest in REITs, real estate investment trusts, which is like buying a stock that owns real estate. And then the actual requirement in a REIT is that they pay out 90% of their income to the stockholders. So it's still a way to invest in stocks, but tie yourself to real estate. You don't get the benefits of investing in real estate yourself, but you are still touching the real estate world. So we're talking about growing a machine that produces money. That can be the stock portfolio, the business that is a business. It can be real estate, but you can actually buy machines that produce money. You can buy vending machines. You can make cash flow from vending machines. You can buy ATMs. How many people didn't know that a lot of ATMs are privately owned? Todd Baldwin had a video that came out recently on how he buys them, where he finds them, how much he's making off of each one. So Todd Baldwin here on YouTube, check out the video. You can literally buy machines that make money. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, actually talks about in his book, when he buys a rental property, it's like having an oil well. He literally looks at mentally that property as a machine that produces money every month. We want to buy assets that produce cash flow. When I talked about how much you earn and adding things that you want to develop side hustles, and it can be vending machines, it could be, my side hustle is actually real estate. I buy a rental property, it produces cash flow. I take my money from the bank, I move it from the bank into the property, then it starts producing a better return than it was getting me in the bank. So my goal is to make as much as I can. And there are several ways that you can generate money from income that don't always require you to sell your life 1 hour at a time. It can be real estate, it can be a vending machine, it can be an ATM, it can be all of those things. Sometimes making more money is developing or learning a skill that you get paid for. I have a friend, Steve, who is a music teacher, and music teachers don't make a lot of money. But if he does that as a side hustle while he's growing his real estate empire, that can still be a side hustle that produces money and something he enjoys. You can learn American Sign Language and get paid to be an interpreter. You can work as a journeyman under an electrician for 4 years as an apprentice. I mean, it would take 4 years to develop the skills, but then your income becomes that of a journeyman electrician. You can, like Jones O did, go to a CDL school to get a CDL to get a better paying job. You don't have to go to 8 years of college to become a doctor or a lawyer. There are jobs that pay more than what you might be making now that might take 4 or 8 weeks of training or 6 months of ASL training to figure out a skill that you can actually make more money on. So we increase that income. In the FIRE community, a lot of people talk about being frugal and not spending money and the latte factor. And Mr. Money Mustache Group talks about, don't have a car, ride a bike to work. Have a better carbon footprint. Okay, I'll give them that. That's true. But you save money by having the bike. I live in Washington. Not really an option. There's about 20 days a year where you can ride a bike in the weather here. I do agree in the FIRE community that you need to be frugal for about 5 years. Those first 5 years before you hit the income snowball, before your cash flow from assets starts to pile up, this is when we don't want to buy the newer car, take the better vacation. We don't want to just upgrade our housing expenses, move into the bigger house for about 5 years. My problem with the FIRE community is some people talk about being frugal forever. If you can reach financial freedom because you bring your cost of living so low, is that a life you want to live? It's possible, and it works for some people, but I'm not frugal. I like to take at least a month trip every year. First, I went to Colombia and then Thailand, and then when the pandemic hit, I took a month with my brothers and traveled all over the country, the United States. I'd seen more countries than states, so now I finally balanced that out some. To eat all the time. I have probably every streaming service you can imagine. I like to take in information. I'm definitely not frugal. But I was for those first about 6 years really, before the income snowball kicked in for me. Some people might not have as much bad debt as I did, so the income snowball might happen sooner. But don't be frugal forever, but be frugal for a while. To make work optional, acquire cash flowing assets that cover your living expenses. Once that happens, I don't think that's actually when somebody should quit their job, unless they hate it. If you hate it, you can quit your job, even if you had to take a lower paying one, because having cash flowing assets that cover your living expenses isn't, for me, the ultimate goal. Like I said, I'm not frugal. Once you have your living expenses covered, I like to have a nice car, right? But I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to sell my life 1 hour at a time to pay for that vehicle. So I want to buy a cash flowing asset. Another thing, right out of Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you want to buy a nice car, how much would the payment be? $1,000 a month for the payment, the insurance, the upkeep. Buy a rental property that produces $1,000 a month. And then in 5 years, when that truck is paid off, you still own the asset. It's appreciated. You've experienced principal pay down. You're still getting cash flow. You have the thing that you wanted that was a luxury, not a life requirement. I could have bought a cheaper car, but have an asset for that expense. Just like healthcare. A lot of people worry, I can't quit my job because I don't have healthcare covered. Well, like I said earlier, right now you are paying for healthcare. If you are working for a W-2 company, a regular job where you're going to work to get a paycheck, if that employer is providing you with healthcare, you're paying for it. Part of your compensation package, even if you don't see it coming out of your paycheck. As an employer, we have about 60 staff, so our healthcare is a little bit more expensive. We pay somewhere between $1,100 and $1,700 based on the person's age and a couple of other health factors, right? Our employees pay, I don't know, it's like 5%. So somewhere between $50 and $200, depending on all of the factors per month. So when they stop working for us, those people will pick up the expense on the employer side. So what you need, if you are worried about healthcare, your healthcare bill is going to be somewhere between $1,100, maybe $2,000 as you get older, right? Per month. So you need an asset that produces that much money every month to cover that expense. Don't get locked into thinking you have to work because you need benefits. You need an asset that covers the expense of healthcare, housing, healthcare, transportation, food, entertainment, an asset for every expense. We reach financial freedom, financial independence by not having to work. That's when our living expenses are covered. When we reach financial freedom, that's when we have enough money coming in from our assets that we don't have to look at price tags. We don't have to think. I still think when I go to a country, I looked at Colombia and Thailand, top of the list, they still like Americans. Few countries where that's a thing. So that's where I'm looking to go. Second thing, economic strength. The dollar compared to their currency, you can go. When I went to Colombia and Thailand, my portfolio was a bit smaller. Like in Colombia, it was less than half of what it is now. I still came back from a month in Colombia where I did everything. I had more money when I came back than what I left with. Those are the kind of countries that I currently like to visit. As the cash flow from the assets increases, you could start to go to more expensive countries and not worry about the price tag.
But not today.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.